Welcome to the latest edition of the Shukri Wrights Podcast with your host, Shukri Wrights. This guest is a returnee to the podcast. Had him back in December. It's been a while, but it's perfect timing to have him back on now. Ben Ross, broadcaster, play-by-play broadcaster, writer. He's covered the A's for NBC Sports California. He joins the podcast. Ben, what's going on? What's been new, man? It's been like how many months?
Yeah, it's been a while.
8 months almost?
Yeah, 8 or 9, I think.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me back. It's really good to be back on.
For sure.
Doing well, yeah, keeping busy. Like you said, I do play-by-play for a lot of like college sports around here in Northern California. I write for the Associated Press, and I do some freelance writing too for other newspapers like the San Francisco Examiner. As you mentioned, I used to cover the A's for NBC Sports California and NBC Sports Bay Area. So I'm still there a couple of days a week freelancing for them as well. So I'm still very much up on the A's and the Giants out here. And yeah, man, it's good to be back on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. I mean, so much has gone on since we last spoke in December, which was going back to the holiday season of 2020. Like, what's been new? Like, what's been going on? Like, any new changes in your life? Like, what's going on?
Man, just a little busier, I think, now that, it's nice to have everything kind of back, like as far as the sports go. Like,
For sure.
I know that this pandemic has been going on so long, and it felt like we were kind of done with it, and now it's coming back, and it's still tough. But I'm just thankful that we've got all the leagues running, and college football is back up and going. And but yeah, for the most part, not too much different for me. I've gone on a few trips. Still living in San Francisco, still kind of doing the freelance life, like I mentioned. I've gotten a couple games with the Pac-12 network as far as play-by-play. So that was in the spring. I did some college baseball broadcasting. So that was fun, and hopefully there will be some more there. But yeah, as I said, kind of living that freelance life between broadcasting, writing, a little bit of everything.
That's amazing. You talked about how you did like play-by-play for the Pac-12 network back in the spring. What was that experience like, and which games did you end up calling?
Yeah, that was awesome. So I did the series. I did the Cal Washington State baseball series in Berkeley, and that must have been back in April, I want to say. And yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, it was sort of a long time coming, because I had been scheduled to do a few games for the Pac-12 network that all got canceled for one reason or another. For the most part, it was because of COVID-19, the pandemic and people testing positive. And so it was disappointing to not get to do some of those other games. So I was really happy that at least we got to do that series. And so, yeah, that was a lot of fun going out to the ballpark in Berkeley. I went to college at Cal, so I remember announcing those baseball games on the radio back a long time ago when I was in school. And Evans Diamond doesn't look a whole lot different. They've made a few upgrades, but
yeah.
It was a good series. Couple of kind of under the radar baseball programs out here on the West Coast, and thought it went really well. It was fun to call those games and have a real broadcast truck there, and have multiple cameras and replays and all the good high tech stuff that TV broadcasts have.
Was that your first time doing play-by-play broadcasting, or this is something that you had done previously before?
Well, it was my first time for the Pac-12 network. I've been doing a lot of play-by-play I do play-by-play for the West Coast Conference and for some Mountain West games as well, San Jose State. But I mean, again, in the Bay Area, there's so many colleges. Cal and Stanford obviously are the big ones, but
yeah.
I do games for St. Mary's College and Santa Clara University, University of San Francisco, as I mentioned, San Jose State. So I've even been out to Stockton to do some University of the Pacific games. Yeah, for those who know California, Stockton is it's actually not too far away, maybe an hour or so east from where I'm at. And they've got a good program in the WCC as well. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of play-by-play. It's something I loved doing when I was in college, and I kind of got away from it. And I was kind of bummed I got away from it, because I sort of went down the path of like more local sports TV, like on the local news. I went and I went to a couple of smaller places and reported like the sports segments on the local news. And that was fun too. But I really missed doing play-by-play. I think that's my favorite thing is calling live action, whether it's radio, TV, internet, whatever. So I'm happy I'm getting to do that again.
That is awesome. And like I recently had having blessed with an opportunity to call hockey as my first play-by-play gig, and I couldn't be more excited. I mean, hockey is something that I've loved since I was young, but I also know that hockey has its own set of challenges, given there's constant action, there's constant change. That changes that are happening on the fly. You have to be like, very fast with it. So I can only imagine like the first time jitters, so to speak, especially when you're doing a play-by-play of a live event.
I'm excited for you. I saw that on Twitter. Congratulations on that hockey gig. That's very cool. And you're right. Like I grew up loving hockey too. And you're right. I've called a few hockey games before, and it's tough. It's fun though. Like, as you said, it's challenging because it's such a fast sport and it's nonstop action, but it's fun. Like I love that. I kind of like the faster sports for play-by-play. I think I've gotten better at doing baseball, but it was a little bit tougher for me at first because baseball is obviously a very slow moving sport.
Yes.
A lot of downtime, and obviously the best baseball announcers out there do a great job with stories, and they just have so much information to keep it interesting between pitches. So that was sort of like a learning process for me. But yeah, hockey has always been one of my favorites. So I'm excited to hear you do that.
I appreciate that. Like, I can't wait to get started this fall. And speaking of this fall, it's going to be a really interesting time for the Bay Area, in particular, the San Francisco Giants, who currently have the best record in baseball, and the Oakland A's, in which that they're fighting for a wild card spot. Now, let's start with the Oakland A's, because I saw what happened the night that Chris Bassett had gotten hit in the face with that line drive in Chicago. Any new updates as it pertains to Bassett, and as well as the Oakland A's as they continue to try to claw their way to a wild card spot for October baseball?
Well, yeah, I mean, and you probably know it because I know you're an American League fan, and so I'm sure you got the Yankees, the Red Sox, the A's, all kind of in that wild card race, and the A's have really been struggling recently. They've kind of fallen on some tough times, but with Chris Bassett, man, I mean, that was obviously so scary when we saw that happen, and thank God it seems like he's going to be okay. He underwent surgery, because he had a fracture, I think, in his cheek, so he underwent surgery, and he actually looks pretty good. He's back with the team now. Like, he's obviously not playing, but he's back in the clubhouse, in the dugout. He's done a couple interviews and he looks and feels pretty good. And, the thing with Bassett is he's the kind of guy who he's going to get back out there the minute they let him. Like, I feel like for some guys, they might not pitch again this year, but I wouldn't put anything past him. He's such a competitor that I could see him maybe coming back at some point this month in September, or certainly if the A's were able to get into the playoffs. But I'm so thankful that it could have been a lot worse than he was. And that's always so scary. I mean, that's when you see a pitcher get hit by a line drive like that, it's just, you just hold your breath and you just pray and you hope that everything's going to be okay. So that's the good news for him. But yeah, for the A's, I mean, they've been struggling. They just got swept. They just got swept by Toronto. Before that, they had blown a couple of late leads against the Giants, against the Mariners. Their bullpen has fallen on some tough times, and all of a sudden they find themselves, I think, 3.5, 4 games out of a wild card spot, and they're running out of time. They've been sort of streaky all year long, but they need to go on a winning streak now if they're going to have any chance to get in.
Absolutely. And I watched pieces of the A's and Blue Jays series in which I saw Marcus Semien. I mean, he just looked like the Marcus Semien that we've known over the last few years. And it leads me to ask you this question. The Oakland A's this season, they have not been the same offensive team that they have been in the previous 2-3 seasons. And that has a lot to do with the departure of Marcus Semien from the middle of that lineup. And Matt Chapman has not had that same kind of protection in that lineup in which he now has to carry the load by himself by and large part. So I'll ask you this. Is it fair to say that the Oakland A's are missing Marcus Semien's bat, and do they regret not bringing him back during last free agency?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a very fair point that you make. I don't think there's any question they're missing his bat. I mean, you're seeing what he's doing with the Blue Jays. I think he just hit his 38th home run of the year tonight. I mean, he is having a great year. And yeah, the A's, I think, are really missing his production. The Matt Chapman thing is interesting because he kind of is having a down year. He's been hitting better recently, but he's definitely not playing up to his capability, I think, offensively. The offense has gotten better for the A's since the trade deadline. They added some big pieces. They added Starling Marte, who's been great. They added Josh Harrison, who's also been great. Yan Gomes. They've gotten some production from those guys. And then probably their best hitter all year has been Matt Olson, who was an all-star. But I don't think there's any question that they're missing Semien's bat. Now, as far as do they regret not bringing him back, that's what's so tough about the A's, man. And that's what was disappointing this offseason, because we kind of saw it coming. They always have such a low payroll. Yeah. The ownership does not want to really invest anything into this team. And A's fans have seen this happen for years now, where they let their best players go all the time. And it is just so frustrating because, not only Marcus Semien, but Liam Hendricks, the all-star closer who's now with the White Sox. We talk about how the A's bullpen has been struggling. They're missing him like crazy too. So, I mean, I think that on some level they have to regret not bringing those guys back. But on the other hand, that's just how they do things. Ownership doesn't really provide them the resources to compete and pay these guys. It's tough to be an A's fan in that regard.
Going from the east side of the Bay to the west side of the Bay, let's go to San Francisco, because the Giants, and I've said this on multiple radio shows, multiple podcasts, that the Giants have really been the big story in baseball this year, that no one could have foreseen the San Francisco Giants not only having the best record in baseball for long stretches of the regular season, but to also be a game ahead of the Los Angeles Dodgers, coming off a big series win over the Dodgers over the weekend. So the first question I want to ask you in terms of the Giants is this. Do you look at this rotation and say, this rotation reminds me of of those Giants teams that won 3 championships in 5 years? Or do you say that the veterans in this lineup has had great years of production, similar to the years that the Giants were winning World Series in 2010, 12, and 14, as a reason why they are having the success that they're having?
Man, I think it's both. I mean, it's been stunning. To me, it's mainly been the offense, if I had to pick one. Like you said, some of the older guys on that team, some of the veterans that I don't think we were expecting to produce,
especially Brandon Crawford. He's like batting 375 with runners in scoring position.
Yeah, Brandon Crawford is like, I mean, you could make a case for him as MVP right now. Like, he's having such a good year at the plate. He's always a great defender. But then Brandon Belt as well, Buster Posey, guys that were on those teams that won the World Series, and they're all having big years. As far as the rotation goes, that I don't think that their starters are as good as the teams that won World Series. I don't think they've got the Matt Cain or the Tim Lincecum kind of guys. But Kevin Gosman is having a terrific year. So is Anthony DiSclafani, who, I don't think anyone expected those guys to perform as well as they have. And the guy that's really impressed me is the youngster Logan Webb, who, like, the last couple of months, I think his ERA is like under 2. I mean, he's making a case to be their number one starter in the playoffs, for game 1 of whatever series they're in. So it really is amazing how good they've been. I think that lineup is really one of the best in baseball. And, their pitching staff, I think people kind of kept waiting for them to sort of come back to earth a little bit, and it just hasn't happened. We're in September, and they still have the best record in baseball. So this team is legit. They're a real World Series contender.
How pleasantly surprised were you by their ability to raise the level of play, especially in a series against the Dodgers, where everybody in the baseball world know that this was a series to watch? Yet the Giants, whenever they've been met with a challenge, they have not only overcome it, but they have exceeded expectations in being able to overcome those challenges. Yeah,
you're completely right. What really impressed me is, heading into that Dodger series, they had been slumping a little bit. I think they lost 4 games in a row, and then they did win the finale against Milwaukee. But remember, the Dodgers moved into first place briefly for like one day. I think the Dodgers moved a half game ahead because they were winning a lot. The Giants had lost 4 in a row. And, I think a lot of people at that point thought maybe this is when the Giants sort of come crashing back to earth a little bit. But they did the opposite. They stepped up. They took 2 of 3 from the Dodgers. And not only that, the Sunday game, they did it with a bullpen game. A lot of the Giants pitchers right now are either injured or on the COVID list, guys like Johnny Cueto and Alex Wood. So they didn't even have a starting pitcher on Sunday. They went full bullpen game, and they beat Walker Buehler, who is, making it, but he's in the Cy Young race for the Dodgers. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Taking 2 of 3, I think that was definitely a big statement for them. And, obviously it's not over yet. It's still, they lead the division just by 1 game. There's almost a full month left. But I do think that really made a big statement that they're right at the Dodgers level. I still consider the Dodgers as the best team in baseball when they're at their best, but you can make the case that Giants are better. They've played the Dodgers very tough this year. I think they ended up winning the season series like 9-8. So, or 10-9 or whatever it was, that by 1 game. And this Giants team has impressed me a lot. Just the way that they've responded like you said, every time they're challenged, they seem to rise to the occasion.
What has impressed you most about Kris Bryant, in which that I think right now he is the single biggest trade deadline acquisition of any team in baseball? I think it's completely fair to say, in terms of what you've seen since he left Chicago to go to San Francisco, has been nothing less than, I can't say shocking, but it's been pretty damn impressive considering his track record.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair statement. You could definitely make that argument that he's been the most, the biggest acquisition. For whatever reason, he has just fit in with that team right away, and he's even said it in interviews. Right when he got there, he felt comfortable. He gelled with his teammates right away. He enjoyed the fans. So he just feels very comfortable there. And you've seen it in the production. He has been really hitting the ball well, and it just makes their lineup that much better, because they already had a good lineup without him. And now you add this big time power threat right in the middle of the lineup. I mean, that's a huge acquisition. And it has worked out as well as they could have possibly hoped.
I mean, it's exciting times for Bay Area baseball fans, but even more so, this is an even bigger point of controversy, if you want to label it as that. How about the 49ers? We are now just a little more than 36 hours away from the kickoff of the 2021 NFL season. But the big story right now in the NFL in terms of quarterbacks is is that head coach Kyle Shanahan has not been able to decide who's going to be the starter. Is it going to be Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance? As someone who is there in the Bay Area, and I'm sure that you listen to local radio, whether it's 95.7 The Game or KNBR, what's the discussion in the Bay Area in San Francisco as it pertains to how Kyle Shanahan is handling this quarterback competition or platoon situation, if you want to call it that?
I think it's fascinating because I think the majority of fans want Trey Lance to play. They want to see Trey Lance. And, it's only a matter of time until Trey Lance takes over, whether that's the start of this season, whether that's midway through the season, whether it's next year. I mean, they went up and they traded a lot to move up and draft him for a reason. They believe he is going to be their franchise quarterback. And I think a lot of the fans are hoping to see him right away. It's interesting how Shanahan has played it, because you're right. He's kind of had some fun with it. Like the media every day, we're asking him, who is it going to be? Are you ready to name a starter yet? And it's interesting to me because at the beginning of training camp, he made it clear, or at least he tried to make it clear, that it was Jimmy Garoppolo's job. We asked him about that, and he said it's not an open competition. It's Jimmy Garoppolo is the one and Trey Lance is the two. However, throughout training camp, I think it's safe to say that you got to take it with a grain of salt, I guess, in training camp. But Lance has looked really good. And that's not to say Garoppolo hasn't. But I think we know who Jimmy Garoppolo is. Trey Lance is sort of the unknown here. He's looked really good. And I think Shanahan's language has been less definitive as we've moved closer to the season. Wow. Now he it's not so much that, oh yeah, Garoppolo's definitely the number one. Like, I do think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to end up being the guy. He hasn't announced it, but he's sort of hinted at that, at least in week one. But I do think that Trey Lance is a lot closer than he made it seem at the beginning of training camp. And so I think, as I said, it's only a matter of time. If I had to guess, I'd say we're going to see Trey Lance starting games at some point this season.
I think it's going to be really fascinating because personally, on the outside looking in, I mean, having just witnessed a quarterback competition here in New England between Mac Jones and Cam Newton, and I was on Team Mac Jones. But what I've seen from Kyle Shanahan is he's not ready to make a decision, or dare I say, he doesn't have the balls to make a decision because either way, no matter what he was going to do, he was going to be criticized. You go with the rookie. If Trey Lance falls on his face, guess who gets to blame? Kyle Shanahan. You start Jimmy G and he struggles like the way he did to start the 2020 season. You guess who gets to blame? Kyle Shanahan. Now, if you are the brass of the 49ers and you're general manager John Lynch, and you're looking at this roster as it's currently constructed, which quarterback do you firmly believe gives you the best chance to win?
It's a tough question. And I personally think the answer is Trey Lance. Now, let me rephrase. I think Trey Lance gives you the best chance to win a Super Bowl this season. I think maybe there's going to be some growing pains early on. But to me, the goal is to win a Super Bowl this year if you're the 49ers. And I say Trey Lance has a much higher ceiling than Jimmy Garoppolo does. And for that reason, I think the earlier you can get Trey Lance in games and in that offense, the sooner he's going to learn and become more developed and hopefully be the player you need him to be heading into the playoffs. So that's sort of the way that I look at it. Now, that's not to say that Jimmy Garoppolo can't lead them there. Look, 2 years ago, he did lead them to a Super Bowl. They didn't win. And obviously that team was stacked defensively and they had lots of other pieces too, but he was the quarterback and he played well enough to get them to a Super Bowl. And so, he might be able to do that again. I think, as I said, Trey Lance's ceiling is significantly higher than Jimmy Garoppolo's.
last question before I wrap up the podcast interview. Now, coming up very shortly is the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and the NFL did in fact announce that they're going to do something this weekend. I think on the national broadcast of each game, to commemorate the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So I want to ask you to share with me your memories and recollection of that day, what you remember, and how it impacted you. Especially you, given that you were on the West Coast and so forth.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that it's already been 20 years?
It doesn't feel like it. I was thinking about this tonight. Yeah.
I mean, I still remember it vividly. And I mean, I just remember, like you said, I was on the West Coast. So I woke up to the news because I think I was in I was in high school at the time. I think I was 16 years old. And I just remember waking up, and back then, the first thing I would do when I woke up is turn on some sports radio. And so I turned on the sports radio probably 7 or 7:30 in the morning.
Wow.
On the West Coast. And obviously they're not talking about sports at all. They're talking about this terrible tragedy. And at that point I turned on the news, and I remember wondering, like, if I was even, did we have school that day? What were we doing? And I did end up going to school. And I remember that's sort of all we talked about, in our history class. I had this history teacher that we all loved, and he was trying to kind of talk big picture about everything and what this all means. And as I said, I can't believe it's going to be 20 years. It's been 20 years because it feels like it was just a couple years ago. So, just a really obviously a terrible day. And, even though I'm on the West Coast, I've got lots of family in New York, and, fortunately my family was all okay, but they all know people that passed on that day. And, it's, you think of New York as such a big place, but it's a pretty tight knit, small community. And I think everybody back east probably knows someone who was lost that day. And so it kind of hits home for everyone.
I agree. Like, it's really just difficult to just fathom and just to let us sink in that it's been 20 years. It's just, I mean, I know that the anniversary itself is just another couple of days away from the time of this recording. And it's still amazing that I'm having conversations with 20, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds who have no memory of this day at all. Mm-hmm. They were either 2 years old or they're flat out were just like infants. I mean, 2 years old, you're a baby, but like you're either 2 years old or younger. Like, you have no memory of this day whatsoever. And it's like, it's like, wow, like, it's like, how do you try to put this in perspective for anybody, for anyone in any walk of life that did not live through that day, the day that we lived through, and to put it into perspective. And you're seeing a lot of 9/11 related programs, documentaries that are airing this week, and I just think that outside of sports, I think it's a great thing, because considering, number one, again, 20 years is just flat out, it's just numbing emotionally that it's been that long. But even more importantly, that I think as more time passes, the more I think we realize just how much the world changed on that day alone. Yeah. I mean, for 21-year-olds, the biggest news of their lifetime is the pandemic. For us, it's no question 9/11. Like, and it's just amazing to me that we're about to hit the 20-year anniversaries. And with that being said, I want to say thank you for coming on the podcast, Ben. It's definitely been a blast. We got to definitely do this again, and hopefully we'll have a lot more time on our side to be able to dive deeper into everything that's going on in the Bay Area, for sure.
Absolutely, man. Hey, thank you for having me on anytime. I love coming on, and let me know. We can talk sports anytime.
Absolutely. My pleasure.